tonight we're just talking as a group. We're going to sort of break out into smaller groups a little bit later. But the theme tonight is learning goals, which is there's like a boring side to it, but kind of something that I want to touch on it just a little bit. But also kind of an interesting side, a philosophical side. We did this last year, and one of the steps in the process was we did exit interviews with folks. And rather than talk about like, oh, invention education, how are you using it? It was really sort of more philosophical. Like, when did you start teaching? Why did you start teaching? As a teacher, what are your goals? What makes you happy to see in the classroom? So feel free tonight to talk a little bit about that. If you want to take it deep. But we'll start shallow. And one question I wanted to ask the group is, are standards part of what you do in your school and your administration? I see like some nods and some people just kind of like, but if you can, just in the chat here, and this is just to get the conversation started in the chat, and then also on the agenda here, I'll put the agenda in the chat so you can access it. I know a few people are on there already. Okay. If you want to put in the chat, what standards are you working through, like either right now, or are there any standards that invention education seems to hit for you or is applicable? You can go ahead and do that. Oh, whoops. Let me put this. This link goes to the agenda. I don't know if you remember, but there's a section I just copy this over every time. There's a section at the end of the agenda with your just short bios. So if you want to write a little bit of a note about, standards that you use in your state or your district, and maybe how invention hits those, feel free. But really, I'm just curious, like if you put it in the chat, what standards are you required to use? Common Core, NGSS if you're in the sciences. What's actually meaningful? What does your principal check in on, or your department head? And if anyone wants to sort of chime in and speak to the crowd, feel free to do so.
A lot of our standards go into relate how these science fields relate to normal everyday life. So I piggyback on that of, okay, well, how are these things causing issues in your life? What are some ways we could go about solving that? So that's how I open the idea that I try to get my students to understand that science is, it's not just something in a textbook. It's everyday life. It's what happens to you inside and outside of this building, and how can the problems you're running into in everyday life be solved, using some of the stuff we're learning in class. So that's how I open the floor to, okay, well, thinking about problems as not just some esoteric thing, but as problems are leading to solutions.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Does everyone else, do they have sort of a, with the standards, if you're saying that you have to use them or they're a part of what you do for state standards, is there that sort of problem solving element where you're asking students to take on these challenges that exist in the real world? Is that something that you're asked to do in your class, whether you're a science teacher or a humanities teacher, middle school or high school? Is that something that you run into?
The Tennessee science standards are written in a 3D model where we have cross-cutting concepts and science and engineering practices, and then the core topic. And I think that is an NGSS base. So it's more difficult to sometimes find something that PBS has right now. There's a lot of great life science, but I haven't found things I can use with our chemistry unit or our weather unit, things like that. So,
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Well, email me separately. I'll send you some stuff. Hi, Terry. How you doing? Um, yeah. So it's an interesting conversation, and I have my background is in book publishing. Oh, Vilma.
Hi, I teach physics here in Texas, and we have the take whose are the objectives for the state. And this year, we're implementing the engineering practices into physics. So a lot of the engineering cycle, it goes like hand to hand with the invention, like identify the problem and go through the whole process. So it's like they connect perfectly.
Yeah, yeah, and that's we partly because of where this program came from, we talk about invention education and the invention cycle. But it seems like with a lot of standards, state standards, there's a focus on the engineering process, which is quite frankly just about identical. I think with invention, a lot of times there's maybe a little bit more emphasis on entrepreneurship and what happens after the engineering process. But the way that they're described from all the literature that I've read, the way that they're described, are pretty much the same thing. I saw a couple other hands up, but then were retracted. Seema, did you?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to piggyback on what it
Vilma.
earlier shared about connecting the standards that the invention education with. I teach robotics.
Mhm.
And that goes like perfectly with it. And I also teach IT honors to like a high school course to the middle school kids. And actually, we use one of the lessons about the sensor, concussion sensor lesson, how student found it. And a few of my students, they use that ideas somewhat similar, and they are working on, like they applied for different competition like Thomson Edison and all those things, and so they are creating their own idea for applying this. So this is a great way of combining that.
Oh yeah, fantastic. I think it's especially for the teachers that are working with engineering standards in STEM fields is relatively easy. How about does anyone from the humanities side of the group want to share how they're connecting it? Is there a way to connect it? I know that there's a lot of just based on the feedback that you've given, there's a lot of standards that involve communicating ideas and talking through problems that you all have connected with. But any other ways that humanities side teachers are connecting?
I can offer something. I look at the standards a little bit more from a holistic point of view. So I teach social studies, and we definitely have social studies standards. But I mean, I really try to focus my kids on the interdisciplinary nature of what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And so I don't want them to think of this as, sometimes it's easy, this is social studies, this is science, this is language arts, this is world language. But I want my kids to think a little bit more holistically about what we're doing. And so even though we're using social studies standards, one of the frameworks of my class is, I think I've mentioned this before, is the Sustainable Development Goals or the global goals. And those are really interdisciplinary. So if we're talking about, I don't know, climate action or something like that, or water and sanitation in my humanities class, we're not just bringing in social studies standards, we're also bringing in science and engineering and other kinds of content and skill sets.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I mean, that was actually another question that I have. Do any of you work with teachers in other subject areas? Well, you just mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals curriculum, which, from my experience, it seems like that's relatively popular. Maybe I said that because my own son went through that when he was in, 5th, 6th grade. But it seems like, one of the most common and sort of functional working models for teachers across subject areas to work on group project-based learning together. I see a couple hands up. Sequoia.
Yeah, no, I mean, I do work with the research science teacher at the high school. You know, because right now we're still working on that lesson plan. What's the problem? Learning to meet challenges through invention. So not only are my media students, you know, creating a filming about it, but they're also creating an invention. You know,
Yeah.
so they're working on the invention, trying to figure out what type of invention they want to create. They had something to do with climate change. So they asked a lot of advice, as well as myself, to the research science teacher at the school. And at the same time, they're recording their process. They're doing interviews. You know, they're, you know, seeing who's has that valuable information. You know, who do they ask? Do they, you know, who can they ask about climate change? You know, so yeah, doing work with the research science teacher is great. And like I said, you know, and I'm just the media teacher there. Well, visual arts teacher as well. But yeah, so yep.
That's great. And, you know, I think, you know, for humanities teachers, you teach, you know, in media arts specifically, but that step of the process where you seek out and maybe interview as a class stakeholders that are affected by a particular problem. I know that that's just a terrific way for a lot of humanities teachers to sort of meet some of the goals that they need to meet in their class, whether it's in an English class or social studies, civics class. Sean and well, actually Tracy. I think Tracy was next. Are you there, Tracy?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good deal. I was messing with my audio for a moment. I had to log out and get back on. But I did hear the component about working with other teachers. So I'm thankful that I'm a social studies teacher. And, you know, my project is we're inventing this game that's going to enlighten the community about the Juneteenth holiday and discuss cultural and historical Black accomplishments, achievements, so forth and so on. But who we got to work with that I felt very happy about is the journalism teacher. We had a journalism teacher who had agreed to work with us in terms of for the Black History event that we're having, where we're going to launch this game. The journalism teacher has decided to create commercials for us and get her class to help us develop a YouTube playlist so that we can I heard the other teacher, Dr. Sequoia, talk about filming. You know, I love thinking about doing those things, but I'm not as savvy as the journalism teacher is at our school. So she's working with our class to create footage, edit things so that we can create that video piece that's going to also accompany this launching of this board game for the community event. But then we also have the band teacher and the choir teacher who they, you know, offered, you know, their assistance to make sure we had some more components to the movie part. So of the three little pieces, we got the game itself that's being launched. It's been created by the students. But we also had the students they're making the press release. They were the people that developed the actual components of the game. So we got a bunch of different moving parts, and I'm very happy to be able to pull in anyone that's willing. You know, I didn't force it on anybody, but I put a couple of emails out just, you know, to the school when I first, you know, began this journey with you guys. And I had a lot of people that said they were interested, but I also understand sometimes you get busy, you can't. But the few people that were consistent and was like, hey, we still do want to work with you, I felt very comfortable about those collaborations.
That's amazing to hear. I mean, that's really, you know, when we were thinking that this might be content that works well for humanities teachers as well. That's kind of the model that we were thinking of. It's just, you know, this sort of project-based learning that brings in classrooms from all over. I love the idea of, you know, the band getting involved, and I think that's really cool. Let's see, a couple other people. Sean.
You were talking about cross-curricular type lessons. When I'm teaching one of the classes I teach is physical science and physics. I incorporate a lot of history into it. You know, you think about the historical eras that we talk about, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, these are all technological changes. So when we're talking about, creating alloys or things like that, and what did it take for these people to figure out, first of all, how did you get that temperature high enough and figure out how these metals go together to create other things? All of these are changes in technology, which mark changes in how humans do society, what kind of machining they're capable of doing, what kind of agriculture and building societies, and the development of that manufacturing class of people and on up through history.
That's an amazing idea. And we have I don't know if he's here tonight, but Scott, who teaches in LA, maybe that's who was recording earlier. Scott is teaching a history. He teaches an ethnic studies class, and he's doing a whole unit on African American inventors as sort of a lead into his invention project, which is really cool. And I think that that sort of historical approach leading up to sort of an invention project is a nice model to use too. Well, let's see, it's somehow already 6:20. I wanted to introduce you, Sean, one of the folks that we have on tonight as a special guest, and I know probably most of you that are here have heard me mention this, but just for the folks that joined a little bit later, we asked all of the fellows really from last year if they wanted to come on and join tonight, just so we could talk to them a little bit about how they're using invention education. And one of the questions that I've had is, especially for teachers that didn't really use invention education before last year in their class, what stuck? What do they continue to use even though they're outside their fellowship? And then I think the group tonight is probably mostly teachers that have already been pretty deeply involved in invention education. So I wanted to ask you, what have you taken from the world of current events that you use in your invention education, or sort of some of the other sort of more humanities-based subject material? And you've kind of answered that question, Sean, but since you were just talking about it, I'll extend that question to you first. So, this doesn't necessarily have to be about, the NewsHour classroom lessons that you used last year, but are there things that, came out of last year related to, connecting invention and engineering to current events that you've continued to use this year?
Well, I mean, you mentioned COVID at the beginning and how we're doing coming out of that. I live in the Deep South, and you can imagine what the kind of response we got to vaccines and mask mandates and that kind of stuff down here. So you have to go back to a lot of foundational science. Like give you an example as far as masks. We had a lot of people down here talk about, well, masks can do this, but they can't do that. And if you wear them too long, you're going to build up too much carbon dioxide. So, you go back to good old scientific notation. How big is the virus? How big is a carbon dioxide molecule? Look, if it's either doing one or the other, it can't, if the virus is getting through, I guarantee the carbon dioxide is too. So, yeah. But what I was talking about earlier with the inventions and going through the different scales of time, you get a lot of people, they love these shows about ancient aliens and how did we build pyramids and how did we make this, how did these people from a long ago, and they have this mental picture of we were Stone Age people up to the 1800s, and then we learned all this modern stuff. And they don't get it that that people knew the world was round thousands of years before Christopher Columbus. They don't. So it's a lot of it. I incorporate a lot of history into lessons because I'm trying to get these kids to understand the background of this stuff. That people with a sight line and a string can build a 13-acre pyramid that's an eighth of an inch out of square. It's possible to do that.
Hmm.
When you have a gigantic workforce that has nothing to do because their fields are flooded, you can build really big stone monuments.
Terrific. Well,
So,
I see your hand raised, and yeah, I would love to hear from you. But if anyone else has an example, if they're doing something similar where they're connecting innovation to this history of innovation and using invention broadly as a way to talk about, sort of the path of human history, I'd love to hear about that. Yes, Seema. Oh, you're on mute. Oh, I still can't hear you. I don't know what.
Sorry.
Oh, there
Sorry,
we go.
I'm on my phone. I'm on my phone. So it's like the tabs were, sorry about
Yeah,
that.
no worries.
But no, I teach biology, high school biology to eighth graders. And I use the same way, like when I taught them about microscope and how it was invented. Robert Hooke invented the first microscope. So that was like just from the quark cells. And so we incorporate in science. Sometimes you don't even realize that you are actually doing it because you're focused on the science standard, but you indirectly you are doing it, like cell theory, like how it was from 1700 to all the way to 2000, how the whole cell theory is evolved and how it was changed based on repetitive discoveries by different scientists and confirmation. That's when it became a theory. So there is a lot of history behind it. Like when they see the light microscope right now with the Onion Lab, but we give them that background and they make that connection that, hey, this was not invented 200 years ago. So like so there is a lot of history connected to all of these topics that we teach in life, like biology. So I just wanted to share.
I hadn't really thought about that, but that makes a lot of sense. That for a lot of our STEM teachers, there might be overlap, there might be collaboration with humanities teachers, but history is a big part of probably what a lot of you are doing, and the history of ideas and how they're formed, and the history of discoveries, and understanding that is really important for students to understand the state of science today. So yeah, that's a really interesting approach. Does anyone else have that approach, whether they're coming from the humanities side or the STEM side? Do you talk about the history of science, Terry?
Good evening, everybody. So yes, history is one of my favorite subjects, even though I am a science teacher by certification. And so we're currently doing a unit on bioengineering. So we're talking about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. We talk about stem cells, and we are collaborating with social studies and history teachers to talk about informed consent. And that issue is coming back again. And then, of course, the ethics of bioengineering. So it's always kind of bringing it full circle. And I really like the Invention Ed lessons. Last year, I was new to the program. And so for me as a science teacher and a career changer, I was always thinking I had to prepare my students for what they were going to do later on in college or later on as a career. This really showed me that my students can.
If you could give me a minute.
Okay, I'll circle back to you.
Oh, someone else's.
Hey, Rebecca.
Yeah, somebody else's. Okay, that they are right now.
Right.
They have ideas.
Sorry,
right
I'm in the process of feeding dogs right now. I just got home.
All right, I think I got it.
Get that part?
I had to mute one of you. Go ahead, Terry. I'm sorry.
That was it. It was just to say that they're capable of doing those things right now, and that they have great ideas, and they're bringing their creativity, their ingenuity right now. So that was the shift for me. And so this year, it's always thinking like, okay, so if we're seeing this issue come up again, What can we do? How would we approach it? If you're thinking about going to the STEM field, what would you do? What's the problem of practice, and how would you approach? What are the different ideas you have to solve these problems?
Mhm.
Terry, I think that's amazing that you're getting that much ethics into your science. I think it's really, really important. I wish it was a bigger part of how we connect to people, how we connect the science to people. And that's what I try to get with Invention with my students is, solve local problems. Look at things that are going on. And I think my students sometimes get the idea that inventors are these, they're all, Newton and Galileo and Einstein, and these are the kind of people that invent stuff. And Kevin and I have talked a lot about this. We both live in small rural areas. Farmers are great inventors. If they break something or they need a tool to do a particular job, they make their they make their tool. So this is what inventors are. They're everyday people that come up with something to fix a problem for them. And that's that mindset that I try to get my students into.
That's such an important point, and that's you just kind of described the essence of what we're trying to do is use invention as sort of one pathway to have students see themselves as sort of active citizens in their community and in their state and on the global stage as well. And the idea that you have to get a PhD or become Stephen Hawking or someone that's like far advanced to make a difference through invention is sort of a myth that we want to try to bust. And Terry, I love the idea of taking that sort of ethics approach to science. And it seems like there's a lot of overlap that can happen there between civics and social studies classes and STEM classes. Kevin, I think you had your hand up at one point.
Yeah, I was just going to mention from the STEM side of things, like with aerospace engineering and the architecture classes I teach, it's really steeped in history. I mean, that's, you can, when I have kids do projects, I make them, kind of talk about what was going on in the world when this innovation happened in aerospace and architecture, the history involved with it. And referring to what Sean said, at some point during the year, once the kids, really get into their inventions, I make them refer to themselves as inventors. I mean, I make a point to call them that and refer to them as that. But any way you can like cross discipline things. I've been wanting to work with the culinary teacher. He's right across the hall from me, and we're talking about trying to get chocolate 3D printers and different things like that. And we missed an opportunity this year, but he's doing a gingerbread village, and I'm thinking we need to get the class lined up to where my architecture kids are working with your kids and make them do specific styles and things.
That is an amazing creative idea. I love like all the different classrooms getting together and making a gingerbread village based on sort of all these different learning goals. Yeah, Tracy.
I mean, I totally like what Mr. Kevin said because again, it gets you excited and it gets them excited when you're giving them all this extra energy. He's making sure he makes a point to call them inventors so that they can embed that in themselves. For the Miss Terry who spoke on it, it's so important that we continue to lift up and build their spirits while we're working in these projects, because you don't know who's going to go on and take this all further. We're giving them ideas that they didn't think they could even do that. And then they sit in the classroom with some of us and they see they did that. And then Mr. Kevin's over there saying, hey, you're an inventor. Some of them will go off and be Einstein. Some of them will go off and do some of those things. So this is, I just want to, keep shouting out PBS as a whole network, because since I've been a little girl, they continue to do stuff in the field of education and the community, that it's ongoing. And I'm so happy to be a part of this generation of PBS that's saying, hey, let's bring it on into where some local people live, where the teachers, people don't really give us that much credit, but we're the ones sitting in here creating these lesson plans or coming to these types of events and bringing this stuff and giving kids a sense of pride. Those young people in Mr. Kevin's class, they're sitting there with a badge of honor, like, I am an inventor. So who knows what they're going to do in the next 10 years. So yeah, shouts out and kudos to all of us.
I appreciate that, Tracy. And yeah, no, you meant, I mean, this is a little bit of an aside, but that you mentioned sort of a pet peeve of mine, and we are guilty of this at NewsHour. Vic and I are always kind of crusading against it, but we'll have an education topic that we're covering on the show, and we'll talk to every expert under the sun except teachers themselves a lot of the times. Or if our people talk to teachers, they talk to them about just their own classroom. It's like, now wait a minute. These teachers have been doing this in many cases for many decades. They've seen a lot of things. They can talk about education. They can talk about students. They can talk about things beyond just what happened in their classroom yesterday. So yeah, that's something that we'll always draw on teachers themselves for these lessons. Sometimes we go to these conferences and it's just a bunch of folks like us who are in working from home, working for some nonprofit, moving grant funds around or whatever, and they haven't seen a classroom for years. So yeah, anytime you can remind us that we should be paying attention to what the teachers have to say first and foremost is good. Well, I wanted to, Trish, I see your hand up, but I also wanted to, because I haven't had a chance to introduce her yet tonight, another one of our returning guests from last year, Kirsten, from South Carolina. I wanted to ask you, well, you are one of our advisors. You've helped us writing lessons, kind of shaping the program overall, and you also participated as a fellow last year. So you probably haven't learned a lot about invention education from us, but I wanted to ask you about, because you represent sort of the STEM side. Well, first I wanted to ask you to maybe if you could say just like a little bit about your history with invention education, but then also how maybe you've kind of brought current events into your work in the last few years.
Sure. And I've learned lots. I've learned lots from y'all. So it's like, so that's it. So I'm Kirsten. I teach next energy engineering in Columbia, South Carolina. So grades 10 through 12. We're in a really diverse district, which is wonderful because I get to all the students from 5 different high schools, and we get to work together on solving local and global problems. So I have the best job in the world. So I teach engineering, so obviously there's a strong connection there to invention. But I was just thinking as people were talking about history, and that we always have been doing that spend 3 to 4 weeks on build, test, optimizing energy systems. But we're really the invention and thinking of like where what I think PBS is doing is so valuable, and these news stories is we do a lot with Samsung Solve for Tomorrow. And one year they came up with the kids after one of the many school shootings, the kids were really upset because they came back and told us we had to close our doors, and we have a beautiful like open space concept, where they go between classes and collaborate and that type of thing. So they were not happy to shut the doors. So we used the electromagnetic principles that they had learned from the motor to make like an automatic, we have all these windows like to close the blinds and everything else. And it was a kind of sketchy, whatever. I mean, it worked, but kind of invention it was through Samsung. But what struck us was that by solving the problem, by working through it, they felt less like despair and hopeless, and being able to go and present to the district we eventually got to open our doors again, even though their invention was really kind of, probably a fire hazard. As I was watching the comments about, teachable moments, we had a few, but it was one of those, that just how empowered and confident they became. And particularly for my underrepresented students, I think that that's just such a powerful, like you said, seeing yourself as an inventor and seeing yourself as an advocate for the concerns that you have. It really kind of, I think, changed things. So, so over that's kind of, where we go. We let a lot of the students have choice in the problems that they solve, and then the approaches that they have, which makes it a little chaotic at times, but that's part of the fun. What was I supposed to talk about? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I don't know. I don't remember putting myself on mute. But no, I was gonna ask just about current events specifically, and how you've incorporated that into the work you've done, which you've pretty well answered already.
And so in South Carolina, it probably doesn't seem like it, but we're actually being positioned as a leader in electric vehicle manufacturing. But with that, and so we've been building an electric car, but with that, there's also then the whole sustainability and supply chain and lithium batteries and all of that. Those companies are also coming in, as well as the BMWs and Volvos and Volkswagen and all that are building in the area. So that's been an opportunity, and something that's actually what my students are working on this year is lithium battery recycling and automating it with machine learning, because currently when you recycle batteries, they have to be manually sorted by a person. So if they're damaged, and there are ways in Germany, I know they're doing it automatically already, but we're not. So that was something they were concerned about, is as we started thinking about safety, is how, can we use some of these physical properties of the batteries, and they're having some great success with that, to train a model to recognize like the seal on a nickel metal hydride battery versus an alkaline, because they're the same size, they're the same size. And so so that's fun. But yeah, I mean, like I teach amazing students. I'm just along for the ride. That's the way I, feel about it. So yeah. Anyway.
How would you say? Sorry, I feel like I'm interrogating you now, but how would you say your approach to intervention education has changed over the years that you've been doing it? What works better based on your experience?
Letting the students have voice, even for things that I don't necessarily think are the best, but letting them go through that process, even if that means failure, because sometimes it works anyway, and that they really learn to take responsibility, not just in invention but in project management. And just letting them really identify the problems they're passionate about. So the less I do, the better it is, if that makes, that sounds, kind of like a lazy teacher perspective, but it really, but it is I think that's the valuable lesson that I've learned, is that, you provide the background, you provide the support, but kids will do amazing things when they're allowed to. So
That's terrific. Yeah, and that's I've heard something similar from a lot of teachers, and it's hard to do that sort of trust fall, where it's like, hey, why don't you guys come up with the problem that we're going to address? And there's always, you're all excellent teachers, and I know that there's little tricks you have to sort of guide students in certain directions sometimes when they're going off the rails a little bit. But I've heard that again and again, that definitely one of the valuable approaches that you can take with invention education is just that, is letting students kind of lead the way. And sometimes you get students that have been quiet all year, just kind of suddenly becoming superstars, it seems like.
I know my
and
kids are going to be successful when they tell me to leave them alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, Sean can tell you, when we were at Eureka Fest doing invent teams, my kids kicked me out of the dorm and told me to go for a walk and leave them alone so they could get their work done. So
Wish mine had. but no, I was like, no, that's, I mean, that's, all I was going to say is what I really love seeing, and because I do with clean energy, it's all hands on, so I get a pretty wide variety of educational backgrounds in students, as well as their family backgrounds. And so one of the things I truly love is like having you know, a student with all sorts of, you know, whether it's a 504 IEP, showing the AP Everything kid how to do something, how to use a power tool, how to do, you know, and like just the confidence that builds in them being, you know, what they bring to the group, or, you know, catching on a little bit faster that it's okay to fail, you know, and that type of thing. And so I really love that environment of students getting out of their comfort zone. I just think it brings them to the invention process a lot better.
Yeah, that's excellent. And those are some of the stories I love to hear, is the stories of, yeah, those students who you know, in other classroom environments are like always kind of in the back of the class and maybe don't feel like, you know, it's their job to you know, raise their hand first thing. Suddenly like, oh yeah, well, this is really calling out to me. I get to be the star now. I think that's super cool. Well, Trisha, you had your hand up earlier.
Hi, so I didn't want to like take the conversation backwards, but I just wanted to share
Please.
something that I had recently experienced. So I don't know if any of you live close to a national park or a national monument, but I'm in Chicago and I'm a part of this group called STEAM in the Park. And I just had a teacher education professional development center like program down at the Pullman site, which is really very interesting in Chicago. It was recently made a national monument, and it's the only national monument in our state in Illinois, which President Obama distinguished for us. And so the cool thing about this place is that George Pullman was a crazy, crazy inventor. He had made all this money with boxcars, with trains, and then had decided to make some really fancy trains. And then he became rich and had this huge monopoly and decided that he was going to have this fantastic community where all the employees would work. And of course, there was a lot of good and also a lot of bad political things. But the whole history around the time of the Chicago World's Fair and why were his inventions important. And so a part of our training there as teachers would be if we were to take students to the national park and talk about the history, how could they like scamper, design something that somebody had historically created to make it better. And so I teach young kids, I teach, 10, 11, 12-year-olds. And so that's definitely, right up our alley. But if you were ever starting anything with innovation, I would encourage you to go check out whatever national park is near you and see why was that created? What were some of the innovations, to get your kids interested in the history of what's local in their own community. So I just wanted to share that.
That is terrific. Thank you so much for saying that. I was saying at the beginning that I think it's really valuable to have that step in the process where you talk to stakeholders. But if you can do the field trip too, that's terrific. And to be able to connect it to local history, this is something that so many students live around and aren't aware of, and how to connect their own lives to these important moments in their own communities. And not everyone lives in Chicago, but there's history everywhere. But speaking of which, I live in Chicago. I moved here like 5 years ago. I still have to go down and see the whole Pullman exhibit. That'll be good. Tracy, you had your hand up.
Yes, wanted to piggyback off that story, the whole building a community around a specific industry. Now, I'm in Tennessee, and I've been in Tennessee a very long time, but I was born in Alabama. In Birmingham, Alabama, there's steel industry has that very same history. And there was a family, I want to say it's the Vulcan, but whatever the family that kind of monopolized that steel industry in Birmingham, that was their idea. They didn't want to just, mine the stuff and get it. They wanted people to have real jobs, and they built a school and a daycare and a little clinic and housing, areas, so that people who would work these mines in Birmingham would feel very comfortable about about this industry and would grow and evolve with the company. And that's a kind of an old story, but when Miss Tricia mentioned that, I thought about the gingerbread house that the person said that, you know what, that's a great way to, you know, get kids into an older story, even if it's in their locality, or if it's somewhere else, you know, they can think about that, because that's the future. How can you build, you know, self-sustainable communities and create, you know, those types of environments where people are not striking because they don't like their, you know, conditions, and they're not mad and just quit. We probably could take, you know, learn some things from many of these older establishments that did just what Tricia was talking about.
That's a great point. And I feel like tonight I'm really learning just how many points of contact there are between invention education and history in a way that I hadn't really thought of, but it seems like a lot of you have. So I'm happy. I think we gotta design some more lessons around that. Whoops, I just muted myself. So it's about 6:50. I did want to give you all a chance to, you know, basically have a similar discussion, but in smaller groups too. But before I did that, I wanted to ask, we have tonight Dr. Garner. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know we didn't talk about this at all, but this last week you went through some of the survey responses that people had. I just wanted to give you a chance of, if you saw anything that you noticed about what people said about their learning goals, you know, how the lessons, you know, this is specifically about the lessons, you know, this sort of larger philosophical conversation, but how the lessons fit into their learning goals, whether they were, you know, standards based or something, you know, a little more ineffable.
Sure. Well, I wanted to first of all say thank you to those of you who filled out the feedback form that Luke has been sending out over and over again. Thank you, Luke, for doing that. And thank you for those of you that have done that, because it's really helpful to see when we can kind of aggregate what everyone's telling us about the lessons and how they're going. I did want to just talk through a couple of highlights of what you all have been telling us so far, because, you know, I'm a nerd, I'm a data nerd, and I really think it's interesting, and I think you'll think it's interesting too. So there was a question on the form about how you felt the lesson that you were reporting on, how well did it fit in with what you were already teaching in your classes this year. Now we had 13 people respond. 8 people said it was on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 being very low fit or very poor fit, and 5 being very good fit. 8 people indicated 5, which is a good fit. So that's really interesting and good news. 4 people indicated a 2 or a 3, and 1 person indicated a 4. So I know we haven't heard from everybody. And I think one of the things that I take away from that is, if you haven't filled out the form, is it because you haven't found that good fit yet? Which is also helpful feedback for, you know, Luke and Vicky and everybody at PBS. So of the folks that have responded, it seems like it's a fairly good fit, or one of the lessons that you chose is a good fit. But please, if it's not a good fit, we also need to hear from you as well. I did want to also, just while I have the floor and the mic, I did want to call out a couple of quotes about the lessons building awareness of invention and current events. And so a couple of people responded that the lessons seem to help to integrate students' understanding of current affairs in the world, as well as invention and STEM. So one person said the invention process helps us clarify what problems are and move towards solutions, as opposed to being simply paralyzed by the magnitude of or the prevalence of problems or issues in society. And the reason I call that quote out is because one of the threads I've been hearing as we've been talking is building students' sense of agency in the world and their sense of self-efficacy for solving problems. And so I was really interested that one of you had responded with that. Another person responded and said, I realized how interested my students are in what is going on in the world. They're all familiar with the news, but they tend to get their news from social media, maybe not always from the most reputable sources. So I think that's an interesting comment and a conversation starter for us as we work with students about where does this information come from, right? So I thought that was interesting. And then just real quick, I want to call attention to a couple of the more quantitative outcomes again. So there was a question about students' interest in invention. 10 out of the 13 respondents noted an increase in students' interest in invention. So I think that's powerful. The other 3 responses indicated no change because they already rated their students' interest in invention as very high. So that's amazing too, right? That your students are so interested in invention. And then the last question was, there was a question about whether your students, do you think your students see themselves as more inventive after the lesson? And again, this was on a 1 through 5 scale, where 1 would be not much and yes would be, 5 would be yes quite a bit. And the average rating was 4.15. So it was over that 4 threshold. So it seems like the survey responses are mirroring the very, very important, rich feedback and conversations that we're having tonight. So again, thank you so much if you did respond. If you haven't yet responded, please feel free to do so. And I will continue to aggregate some of this information as we go through the year.
Thank you so much. I'm excited that we're doing this. You know, if you have done over our lessons and you haven't filled out the survey yet, it won't be rude to fill it out right now. I'm not gonna hold it against you. Just open up. I put it in the chat, so there's a link at the bottom of the chat there. And yeah, anytime that you do one of the lessons, or even if you know, the survey is designed specifically for sort of the intro lessons that we have kind of on the agendas that we send out or that we've talked about since the beginning of the year. But any of our invention lesson content or any invention lesson content that you've written yourself or have come up with that you want to include in that survey, you know, I'd be curious about. And, you know, if we want to keep our data clean, we can kind of move it out from the rest of the pack. But I'd love to know about whatever you're teaching and, you know, how it intersects with some of the questions that are on this survey. But we'll keep talking about that, and you know, in the second half of the year, I know folks will have had more time to do more of the lesson content and, you know, fit more naturally into some areas of your curriculum. So we'll keep at it. I have created 4 breakout rooms, and we have about half an hour left. So I want to give you all about 20 minutes to just get together with a few other folks and talk about some of these same issues. Does anyone want to share like anything that they heard that they thought was like, oh, whoa, that's pretty cool. I could probably do something similar in my classroom. Or I made these groups partly based on having folks from different subject areas work together. So maybe that didn't happen at all. But did you all hear anything that sounded like, oh yeah, that was really cool. I would like to try that.
We mostly talked about if you're in a very structured setting, some other ways to bring invention education in, even outside of school or before or after school, or so we brainstormed a lot of different ideas for that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's something that we haven't talked about too much, but does anyone here, I mean, I know we only have a few minutes left. Does anyone here do invention with after school programs? Sean, I know that you have a lot of your work that you do takes place after school.
Yeah, most of ours is after school. We just got the notice, we're a state finalist for Samsung this year, and we just finished our design review for the NASA the Human Exploration Rover Challenge in Huntsville. So we're the only one in the state of Mississippi that got picked for it. So
Oh, that's super cool.
Well,
Yeah,
actually, it isn't. I mean, this is university and high school, and we're the only school in Mississippi that's
not
going.
cool that you're the only ones
Yeah,
from
that's-
Mississippi. Right? It's not cool that you
You're lucky, Sean. We didn't get it. I had 2 entry in Samsung, and I was hoping for one, and we
Hey,
didn't get
Sean,
it.
we're a state finalist in Samsung as well. So maybe
We're
we'll see
too.
you in DC.
That would be awesome, Kevin.
Well, for everyone else, could one of you explain what the Samsung challenge is?
So it's called the Samsung Solve for Tomorrow. It's all about inventing for your community. You're looking around your community and identifying a local problem that affects the people in your little world, and coming up with a solution for it. You submit an idea, and there's several levels to it. And you submit an idea, and then if you move up to the next level, then you have to further develop the your proposal. And they change it a little bit from year to year. Sometimes you have to record a video. The nice thing about this is you can do it every year. Some of the bigger competitions, you have to wait a little while, like the one that Kevin and I were talking about earlier up at MIT. It's every 5 years. But yeah, Samsung, you can do it every year.
I just put a link if anyone is interested. And you probably don't, but do you work with anyone outside of STEM fields because it does have that element where you're as you say, you're looking in your own backyards for these challenges. Do you work with other teachers in other subject areas?
Not so much other teachers. We work with a lot of people from the community.
Yeah.
For our one this year, we pulled in people from the forestry department, and the local fire department.
Yeah, we're working with the fire department. But we were national finalists last year, and we won $50,000. And it's amazing for the kids. They took us to a nationals game. They pay for your travel there. It's a great experience. And getting in a losing effort, winning $50,000 is, I'll take that all day.
And they do right by the kids too, because they keep inviting them like to their development conference, to like they have a special level for like non-competitive for internships. So it's really, that's why we do it every year. Because like Kevin said, if if losing, you still get all this technology and money to spend for your classroom, but it's really for the kids, and how they do right by the kids, why we do it every single year.
And an invention convention that was on our last I guess meeting, and I'm gonna take a stab at it next year. That's West Virginia is not a state, so we'll have to go like the alternate pathway to invention convention, but hopefully we can get ourselves established and have a state competition.
That's
That's
Henry
what I was
Ford
talking about.
Competition for those.
And our breakout is just trying to get other teachers on board and get the word out that there's these competitions out there, and it's easy to incorporate a lot of it into curriculum you're already teaching.
And do you think it would work for teachers in social studies, civics to collaborate with STEM teachers on some of these challenges?
Oh yeah, I would. I don't know. A lot of teachers. I don't know. My school's kind of weird, and there's a real divide between CTE and academic, and it's always been that way. I graduated from there 34 years ago or whatever, and it was, you were in that other building, and I'm like, well, I didn't want to read Shakespeare all day. I wanted to draft. So I took drafting, and, and I made a career of it. And, here I am now, and I'm thinking, why can't we get beyond that? But you know, I'm hoping to do a podcast, and I'm hoping to, up our social media game. So, to get more schools across the state involved. In 20 years, we've had 5 invent teams in West Virginia. And there's only been 5 schools that have applied. So every time a school from West Virginia has applied, we've gotten the grant. But I don't know, people just won't get on board for some reason.
It's it feels like a tough barrier to entry. So that's one of the reasons that I'm asking you about it. I know that there is still this kind of divide probably in this group where, we have STEM teachers that can do this the whole year, and we have a lot of teachers in other subject areas. So it's like, well, I can do this for a week, maybe a day through the year, and it's cool, but I don't know how to expand it beyond that. So, one of the reasons I'm asking these questions is I do think that there's a lot of room, and every school is different, every district is different, but for that kind of cross subject area collaboration, even on something like some of these, this is a lot more money out there and a lot more opportunities in some ways for STEM teachers. There aren't a lot of opportunities for English teachers or for social studies teachers to go have their students, or win $50,000 for the classroom. That just doesn't exist as much, but there is a lot of room for this kind of cross collaboration. So I know that we're just about out of time, but I wanted to give. Does anyone else have anything that came out of the breakout rooms that they wanted to mention, especially things that they heard that were kind of cool that they might want to try themselves?
Lou, Kristen made a good point in the chat that Samsung, one of the cool things about it is that it's not just STEM.
Yeah.
One of the groups that won a few years ago, won the whole thing, 100 grand, had set up a network between students and retirees in a home to cross communication. So they, these old people staying in this old folks home had somebody to talk to and interconnect with. And they won the big prize. So
that's terrific. And
it covers all topics. So
it didn't involve, any sort of, amazing technological innovation on the part of the students. It was just a good idea that involved identifying a challenge.
One of the teams that won last year, it was like beehives. It was a sensor that some science students developed to monitor beehives. So it was a mashup of earth science and computer science. And, it would detect disease in the hive, and it was amazing. And these kids I think they ended up winning $200,000 because there was another alternate prize and you could win both. So I think they walked home with almost $250,000. I mean,
what does that money go to? like did the kids just dive onto a big pile of money and split it up amongst themselves?
Well,
going to
half of it has to be spent on Samsung products.
Okay.
That was part of it, but then you go on Donors Choose and just shop your life away. I mean, it was.
Yeah. It's fun to just be like, all right, what else do we want? Like, what does the classroom down the hall need? And but it's any Samsung products. So like we got things like the dry cleaning closet and like random so that like for the culinary class. I mean, it is like those old supermarket spree, except it's all online. And it's the craziest thing in the world, but it's fantastic. So, and the kids, like our kids decided to buy us to start an AI lab. And so we got it was just like, what do you want to buy? Kind of thing. So it's just a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a good experience.
Well, it's sounds like it's open to all of you, so probably not this year, but something to think about for next year. And I'll share it again. I think it might be on the agenda that I copy over every time, but we have a resource list that includes links for a lot of the competitions that you've heard a little bit about. Well, I don't want to keep you all past the half-hour mark. I wish we could talk some more, and we will next year. Happy holidays to you all, and thank you for joining. I wish
Happy holidays.
I could listen to you guys talk for much longer, but I know you all have lives to get back to.
Thank you.